All right, good morning, everybody. You guys are gonna have to bear with me today. I hear a lot of sniffling out there as well. Are you guys getting affected by these winds? Having horrible allergies with the, I guess like gale force winds, that's what they're saying. Winds up to the speed of a force 1 hurricane over the last 3 days. It's totally insane. So bear with my sniffling. All right, sorry I'm running a little bit late today, but we just jump right into it. Where we left off last time. In fact, last time we were talking about Neo-Hittites, and we were talking about Aramaeans, and the emergence of these Aramaeans who lived side by side these Neo-Hittite states. Let me just jump back to where we were last time. And that's just not working. Come on. Escape. It's not helpful. There. Right. Okay. Play. Okay, we're just going to have to jump forward here. Oh, some days. Right, so we were looking at Neo-Hittite states, including Zinjerli, and I think we left off with, we looked at Ayandara. It's a little too far forward. Okay, here we go. Oh, come on. All right, we'll just do this the hard way. Okay, so you get a really fast review here on Ayandara. We looked at really what typifies these Neo-Hittite and Aramaean city-states, right? Not just the city plan, right? Which again is a fortified city plan consisting of a fortified citadel, surrounding walls, but in addition, right, this use of orthostats that later on would be picked up by these Assyrian kings, by Ashurnasirpal II, and used in these fantastic new palaces in the Assyrian heartland at Nimrud. We saw that at Neo-Hittite sites. We also see this at Aramaean sites. And again, the Aramaeans, Aramaean is a West Semitic language that we know as Aramaic. It later becomes the lingua franca of the Fertile Crescent in late antiquity. So as we were saying last time, it's actually still spoken today in some parts of Syria by Syriac Christians. It's dying out, but it's still a living language. So it's important for a number of reasons, but we know that the Aramaeans took control of cities side by side with these Neo-Hittites at sites such as Guzana, right here. Guzana is also known as Tel Halaf. And we see a city which, very similar to Zinjerli, these other sites, these Neo-Hittite sites, is a fortified city, rectangular shaped, and using the river, in this case, the Harbor River, as part of its program of fortifications. We know that this state was attacked by the Assyrians early on during the time of Adad-Ninari in around 911, the great-grandfather of Shalmaneser III, who we'll talk about in a moment. And that for some time, this Aramaean city-state was paying tribute to the Assyrians. It was finally incorporated into the empire under the reign of Shalmaneser, who we'll talk about today. But during the 9th century, it was ruled by a king named Karapa, or Kapara, sorry. As you can see, in addition to these massive fortifications, there is a palace here. And this palace is very interesting for a number of reasons. It's known as the temple/palace of King Karapa. You can see a reconstruction of it here. And there's some interesting traits that set it apart from a number of the palaces we've seen so far. Some traits that we've come to expect, right? A main monumental entrance. In fact, you can see entering in through one of the main city gates, you would actually approach this palace from the back. There's a large fortified bastion with 3 central towers, as you can see here, 1, 2, 3. and then two main corner towers. A very, very large structure. And then in order to approach it, one would have gone through a second gateway and turned back around. So you actually see this palace from the back upon entering the city. And you have to go through this fortified gateway and then come into it, making a full U-turn. And we can see this reconstruction here. Here's that gate. It's known as the Scorpion Gate, primarily because it's guarded, well, we'll see in a second. It's guarded by a number of the protective figures that we've seen before. But I just want to point out that we were talking about this concept of the Bit Helani. We talked about the Bit Helani quite a bit, the emergence of the Bit Helani at places like the Palace of Niknumpa at Alalak, right? The concept of the Bit Helani then transferring to places like Ugarit, and then also right in the 9th century we see it again fully flushed out in this temple palace at Tel Halaf. The Bit Helani again being that columned portico entrance, right? So we see it here at Alalak, one of the first examples. This very unique columned portico, you know, that you enter into with a series of entry rooms before entering the throne room. Same thing at Ugarit, right? Main entrance, columned portico, and also here now in this temple palace at Tel Halaf. Bit Helani again. This is something that the Assyrians, Shalmaneser, Ashurnasirpal, and later Assyrian kings brag about. I built a palace in the style of North Syria. I built a palace in the Bit Helani style. Something that, again, right, is part of this ideological process of appropriation. You know, how best to conquer a people than to, you know, really take their culture and make it your own. So that's what's taking place with this Bit Helani. And I spelled it you can spell it H-I-L-A-N-I. So again, back to the palace itself and the Scorpion Gate. You can see a reconstruction of what this gate would have looked like entering in. And similar to the lion figures, which we see at all of the Neo-Hittite sites, this Aramaean site uses similar flanking figures on either side of the gateway to defend it. Instead of lions, however, these are actually scorpions. You can see that these composite figures, more winged figures, but they have scorpion tails, hence its name, the Scorpion Gate. But you can see a lot of similarities, not just between this site and the Neo-Hittite sites, but also, right, what's going to come a little bit later with the Neo-Assyrian sites. Composite animals defending these gates, these points of transition. I should also point out that these the two scorpions are these, we call them scorpions, they're these composite monsters, almost like Lamassu. One of them is smiling and one of them is frowning. So you get the sense that, again, these figures would have been able to distinguish between friend and foe, who's going to be allowed access to the temple palace and who's actually going to be held back. And actually 3 sets of these gates, so very well fortified construction. When we get to the forecourt of the temple, or the palace as it were, we find actually a burial ground. A number of royal burials were found in this area, attesting to its ritual nature. But it's really when you enter the forecourt and this portico that we see the Bit Helani style now flushed out in a very unique and striking way. We can see actually 3 figures that are used as columns. These are called caryatid figures. Really, that's just a fancy way of saying a pillar that is rendered as a statue. And in this case, there are 3 of them. Each of them are 3 meters high. And in the center, we see this male figure, again, a god standing upon a bull. On the right, a woman standing on a lioness. And then on the left, a male figure standing on a lion. And so you can see the size of these figures. Again, a very, very impressive entryway that would have been made out of basalt. Again, this dark stone, and the contrast, right, with these inlaid limestone eyes, very imposing for those exiting, entering and exiting this temple. In addition to these protective figures, at Tel Halot, at this Aramaean site, we see the same use of carved orthostats. In fact, the lower course of that entire external wall, right, which is about 61 meters in length, you can see the way this was excavated. There's a series of orthostats running along the entire base of it. Orthostats, again, showing scenes from mythology, scenes of conquest, scenes of daily life. Decorative, functional, but certainly intended to give a message, right, to those who are coming and interacting with the king of this palace, King Khepera. And this was something, of course, that the Assyrians decided they liked and decided to adopt into their own program of building. And we can see some of these carved orthostats here. Again, in that very round and particular North Syrian style, sets it apart quite a bit. I don't want to say it's cartoony, but the figures are much more not idealized, but they're fleshed out in very round and basic forms. That naturalism that we see later in the Assyrian period, the attention to proportion, is not present in this North Syrian style. So let's see what happens to these Aramaeans and Neo-Hittites. Let me jump forward here and get back to our lecture. There we go. We talked quite a bit last time about the construction of Ashurnasirpal II's palace at Nimrud, and the way that Ashurnasirpal, right, appropriates these forms of decoration, and the way that really operates as a form of propaganda to push forward this new imperial ideology. And this week, did you guys read Liverani this week or this week? Okay, so you are reading it right now. And really, Liverani does a great job of breaking this down in terms of showing why Assyrian ideology goes hand in hand, not just in text, but in image, and really perpetuates this system of imbalance. Really what we're seeing is a vertical hierarchy of society, right, with the king at the top, courtiers, the Assyrians, being spread out instead of vertically, horizontally, being spread out over the empire and over its periphery, establishing this form of imbalance. And really what this ideology functions to do is to excuse the exploitation of people on the periphery, and really give the Assyrians a right to conquest based on qualitative differences. This ideology really explains how and why people are different, and why some people exist for the exploitation of others. And what's more, it presents this system of exploitation to the exploited in a very favorable light. Really what it's doing is it's substituting people's real social and economic interests for false ones. So in the sense